Rama Airlines could be the name given to a powerful fleet of the past, the fleet of a rich prehistoric empire ruling over northern India, known as Rama's Empire. Rama's empire is widely mentioned in the sacred literature of ancient India. It was highly developed civilization, just like ours, or even more developed at its peak around 12,000 BC. The empire had 7 major capital cities called the 7 Rises, located in northern India. In these cities, comfort and luxury were everywhere. Exquisite foods, exotic zoos, and aviaries, parks and bloom. The ancient descriptions remind of modern cities, and what follows is even harder to swallow. The Rama's planes could travel anywhere on Earth, and even go to the moon or stars. To fly from one city to another, the nobles had individual aircrafts called Vimanas, and also airliners called pushpacks. According to a Jain text of 850 BC, the pushpacks were overhead trolleys used for normal transport and could carry a lot of people from one capital to another. And all this took place in an atmosphere of science fiction from the 60s that makes you want to get a closer look. The show made by the Rishi cities was really weird. Let us hope that sooner or later they will learn also from the light, apart the palaces and big estates equipped with sophisticated pipes. We can also see their factories, geoenergy power plants, lightning sensors, and alignments of small houses for workers. What an amazing modernity for the worlds before the Great Flood. Although they are the most concerned, archaeologists are unaware of these findings. They consider totally absurd. After a lifetime spent exploring the earliest Sanskrit texts, the expert in Indian culture, Elaine Danilu, has made a startling discovery. The Vimanas are described with 2 large diamonds on the front and 2 smaller rubies in the back. Diamonds shine in white, rubies in red. Just like our modern car lights, white headlights, red taillights. Danilu was amazed, and so are we. Even on details like the color of car lights, history is repeated. Enough to confirm the existence of the Akashic records, where everything is written. During the Silver Age, many flying machines crisscrossed the sky, showing the white glare of their headlights or the red glow of their taillights. What a magical show. How could we forget it? So when it was necessary to determine the color of our contemporary vehicles' rear lights, someone has remembered this former wonder. He simply had to make a trip to the great library of the universe. It is very easy indeed. He opened the door of dream. You do it every night. Quotes, descriptions, and stories about Vimanas are numerous. Mahabharata and other scriptures of ancient India. You can find an attempt to classify them. The text distinguished 3 kinds of flying machines. Small Vimanas, to go from one city to another. Large pushpakas, to go from one continent to another. And much faster gears to go into space. There's a Rukma Vimana. That's what it looks like. Our artist rendering. Vertical section. Please note, this only applies to the Indian subcontinent, because at that time, many other flying machines were moving everywhere. In the Middle East, for example, King Solomon did not despise the joys of flight. In Egypt and among the pre-Olmecs, it was also a custom with the gods. Among the Ashvin people, there was another kind of flying machine, the Veilixi, which could fly and sail, even under the sea. Thanks to this technological superiority, the Ashvins finally defeated the Ramas. Who were these Ashvins? Who were this rival high-tech people? Why not the Atlanteans? Then the Mahabharata would tell us the war of all against all. The war of the Atlanteans against the Ramas, of Zeus against Hekatonshires of the Anannaki, against the great planners, the Elohim, a war of the West against the East, already probably doubled with a religious war. Already the Ramas worshipped a Trinitarian deity, and the Atlanteans themselves were strict followers of the One, as evidenced by the U.S. clairvoyant Edgar Cayce. Notice to handyman: to build your Vimana, please follow the ancient manual. Strong and durable must be the body of the Vimana, like a great flying bird, made of light material. Inside must be put the Mercury engine with its metallic heating device underneath. Thanks to the latent power of Mercury, which allows movement, a man sitting inside may travel long distances in the sky. Nowadays, the use of Mercury on that purpose has been totally forgotten until the TR-3B, and that makes our bad scientists laugh. Yeah. The movements of the Vimana, I always think there's an R in there. It's VI mana, like a mage's mana. Vimana are such that it can climb vertically, descend vertically, tilt forward and back. With the help of machines, human beings can fly in the air and eventually return to the ground. No one could invent out of nothing so compelling technical details. Studying these descriptions, U.S. researcher Richard Thompson makes a fundamental distinction between the two kinds of Vimanas, corresponding to two different technological approaches. All reality exists in the mind. The outer phenomenon, that which appears, is only its outer expression. The visible universe is the reflection of the invisible. Plato. Interesting. Go over to the two different types of technologies. Vimanas are flying machines which are often mentioned in the sacred texts of ancient India. The American researcher Richard Thompson makes a fundamental distinction between two kinds of Vimanas, which correspond to two different technological approaches, two different epochs too. The Vimanas fall into two categories. One, some gears made by man, flying with wings as birds, and two, non-profiled structures that fly in a mysterious manner and are generally not made by human beings. The machines in Category 1 are described mainly in medieval Sanskrit texts that speak of architecture, automata, war machine, and other mechanical devices. They are made of wood and fly thanks to wings like our modern aircraft. Although these ancient vehicles are also called Vimanas, most Vimanas does not resemble planes at all. Those in Category 2 date back to ancient time. Mentioned in ancient Sanskrit literature, they have much in common with UFOs, and the pilot who flew them had the same powers as the pilots of UFOs. The flying machine of Salva, a former Indian king, is an interesting example of Vimana. He had acquired it by Maya Devana, coming from a planetary system called Taltal, T-A-L-T-A-L. The Hyperborean physician Abaris was said to have a flying arrow. The Mahabharata gives us the following of this story through the mouth of its hero, Krishna. The cruel Sava arrived on the flying chariot, Subha, that could go anywhere, up which he killed many young Vrishni and devastated fiercely all city parks. I guess he just liked to climb in and put on his goggles and is probably, maybe dual 50 cals or something, or maybe even laser beams. And just like the guy on that movie, Full Metal Jacket, he's shooting the Vietnamese on the helicopter. He says, if they run, they're VC. If they don't run, they're well-trained VC. Just a crazy person. Up which he killed many young Vrishni. His Saba hung in the sky with a good head start. He'd throw rockets, missiles, sabers, swords, battle axes, spears, with 3 blades, flamethrowers, continuously. The sky seemed to have 100 suns, 100 moons, and 100 myriads of stars. There was no more day, no more night, and compass did not work anymore. The aircraft of Salva was very mysterious, said Krishna. It was so extraordinary that sometimes it seemed to multiply in all parts of the sky, and other times it was nowhere. A kind of MHD, an interplan. The aircraft was sometimes visible and sometimes invisible, and the warriors of the Yadu dynasty were taken aback at the performance of this unit. Sometimes they saw the plane on the ground, sometimes in the sky, sometimes placed on top of a hill, and sometimes floating on the water. The wonderful plane was flying in the sky like fireworks. It could not stand still for any moment. Those who have seen UFOs describe them the same way. What an amazing consistency. It's probably the giant survivors, right? The Vimanas were powered by light yellow fuel, as well as a heart powered by a mixture containing mercury. The Vedas, ancient Indian poems considered the most ancient Indian texts, describe the Vimanas as having various shapes and sizes, and their designs varying according to their utilities. The Indian emperor Ashoka was so convinced in the authenticity of these writings that he devoted much of his reign to protect his people from their harmful effects. On this purpose, he created the secret society of the 9 unknown men, 9 great Indian scientists, with the task of cataloging sciences mentioned in old texts and not conceal them from the public. He trembled at the thought that the advanced sciences described in ancient texts bring the devastation of his empire, a fate similar to the one that killed former Rama Empire, the Rukma Vimana. To conceal these ancient sciences to the public, it is feared that the 9 unknown have destroyed many texts considered too dangerous. Maybe they have done well, since at every age people do love playing with fire. Formerly, until the 7th century BC, in Babylon, there were also airplanes. The privilege of using a flying machine is great. The knowledge of flight is among the most ancient of our inheritances. A gift from what is higher, from whom? Atlantean astronauts? Gods of Sumer? Scholars of Tiwanaku? The manuscript does not say. It only adds, we got it from them in order to save many lives. Would the Tower of Babel be a control tower? Edward Casey saw that the Atlanteans had air traffic controllers, thus control towers. Why not also in Babel? I thought of something that, I forgot. Doggone it. It'll come back to me. The history of ancient aircrafts. The secret history of ancient aircrafts. Ignorance is not the lack of knowledge, but the lack of self-knowledge. Without self-knowledge, there is no intelligence. Jiddu Krishnamurti. We're off to secret history of ancient aircrafts. We're going to follow this to the end. Secret history of ancient aircraft. My beloved flying carpet. From the flying carpets of the Arabian Nights to the ardent wheels of the prophet Ezekiel, our past loves, air travel. There are countless myths and legends featuring flying men, jinns, brooms, carts, and carpets, all stories usually relegated to the Department of Nonsense. They want us to believe that all our ancestors, whatever their origin, spent their time telling lies just to mislead us. Moreover, they all tell the same lies. What nerve! Either historians are pendants, or they are pulling our legs, or both. Cover them with shame. Ancient flying machines are a reality. We all know, except historians. I still remember the father of the atom bomb, Oppenheimer, was asked if that was the first time a nuclear device was detonated, or something to that effect, in history. And his response was, well, yes, in current times, of course. So, I don't know. There's there. Perhaps he had privy to inside baseball. On the controversial subject of flying saucers, Jung wrote, the apparent lack of gravity of flying saucer is certainly a difficult to digest story. But it is told modern physics has recently made so many discoveries that, in effect, the miracle. Why could not more advanced people from other planets have found a way to remove the gravity and reach the speed of light, or even more? Nuclear physics has created in the minds of the layperson uncertainty of judgment that goes far beyond that of physics, which makes it appear as possible things that could have been considered stupid and exaggerated. Well, you know, our limit to what we believe is, I think gets desensitized to exposure, right? So, I mean, if we see certain things, we can make claims that someone might think is crazy because we saw it, but someone else hasn't, so they don't have that concept, and that's what makes it really hard. I think that every branch of science is lying to us. Flying saucers can therefore easily be seen as a new miracle of physics, but plasma physics are next gen, and be accredited as such. I remember here, not without discomfort, the time when I was convinced that something that was heavier than air could not fly. Shortly after, I had some discomfort with me to face the facts, and it doesn't give the name. It's got a picture of Freud here. He probably just forgot to write his name, maybe, I don't know. He's a hell of a writer. I mean, he is a hell of a writer. And so ready for the electric universe. You can keep your interest. Chinese mythology speaks of a legendary people, Chai Kung, or Jigung, who moved in air cars. In the 17th century, Jesuit missionaries managed to obtain an ancient Chinese text entitled Documents of Scholars. It reveals that Chan Hing, great astronomer and engineer of the Han Dynasty, fashioned a wooden bird whose stomach contained a mechanism allowing it to fly close to 0.9 miles. Another book, written around 320 AD by the alchemist and mystic Ho Hung, seems for its part to describe propellers. Some have made the wood of the juju, flying cars equipped with leather straps connected to rotating blades that put the machine in motion. At first glance, China seems to be at the origin of modern aeronautics, with the invention of gunpowder. The ancient Chinese also knew how to lock the powder in a tube. The Chinese powder also can propel rockets or cannonballs. The Chinese have used rocket propulsion to all kinds of arrows, grenades, and even iron bombs, very similar to ours. They are credited with production in the 11th century of the first two-stage rocket. It is described as a fire dragon, which while flying set fire to arrows and spat them through the mouth. In 1232, the inhabitants of Kaifeng repelled the Mongols thanks to thunder shaking the sky. It was an iron bomb that a chain projected in the midst of enemies, as well as arrows of flying fire that wreaked chaos in the Mongolian cavalry. The jet propulsion in our story rockets would therefore find here their source. Other Chinese inventions, unless we have to seek an even more distant origin, for several testimonials show that bombs and gunpowder were in use in the time of Christ, and even well before. In the 3rd century, a man called Marcus, or Mark, the Greek, wrote Liber Ignium, a book where he explains how to get explosive powder by mixing 1 pound of sulfur, 2 of charcoal, and 6 of saltpeter, venemas, and Indians' UFOs. You can also find traces of explosive weapons in a much more remote antiquity, the terrifying arsenal developed by the Rama Empire. Several millennia BP, before present, speaks for itself, and even before that, it was worse in terms of weapons of mass destruction. The same empire of Rama is known for its flying machines, called Vimanas or Pushpakas, whose descriptive evoke furiously aircrafts and rockets. Some Indian texts such as the Mahabharata, even describes spherical gears very similar to UFOs. An abundant literature describes the modes of propulsion and types of engines that equipped these very ancient UFOs. But the ancient flight and aviation were not the monopoly of Asia. We find eloquent traces in America. Peru, lines drawn for thousands of years the Nazca Plateau, attract the attention of the curious. Although very few Western archaeologists are interested, don't you think that these lines and figures were drawn to be seen from the sky? Should we see signals and guidance for use of space travelers? Anyway, not far away, the mountain has been leveled and flattened to form a long flat track that evokes an airstrip. From Middle East to China, throughout the route taken by armies of Rama, the conqueror, or the teenager killer, are found curious truncated mountains that tradition calls Solomon Thrones. Legends claim that this magnificent emperor landed his flying machine on these flattened mountains when he traveled on his land. Guess whom Solomon gets his plane from? Did I write that Jung lived at the birth of flying machines? I was totally wrong. They have existed long before.
Because ultrasound is extremely important. One of the people who realized that was Dr. Royal Rife. In 1931, he invented the microscope. And for the first time, someone was able to see live viruses. This is the structure of the viruses. Incidentally, they have a shape of pyramid. Now, of course, the microbes, that includes viruses and bacteria and some bad cells, organisms, they are the base of all our diseases, including cancer. Now, Dr. Rife not only invented the microscope, but also he invented the machine to produce the ultrasound. And then he was checking the effects of different frequencies on viruses. And then he was able to find the frequency that kills viruses.
The planet Venus has got to be the craziest planet in the solar system in matters of art. Like speaking about, well, let me just show you. This planet, it's like it's got all these murals all over it that are like scenes from hell. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I don't know if you've noticed the picture of that creature that I have on one of my videos, the cover. That is a picture from Venus. And these are all taken from the surface of Venus. And if you lack any imagination at all, I suppose that you wouldn't see these things. But even just a little bit of imagination, I mean, it doesn't really take much imagination to make out the characters that are painted all over this planet. You know, I just can't help but think, oh man, this isn't a coincidence, you know. I mean, that's the major question. Are we here as a result of a bunch of coincidences? Or are we here for a purpose that has a much more grand ending than just this? I don't know, you know, it seems like that has to be the case. That's like what Fred Hoyle says, you know, when you're really at the end of the cosmology quest. If you really look at it, there's no way that this can all just be an accident. No way.
Was this worked out by somebody, or was it, did it just happen by chance? Which is really the same thing as saying, did the universe happen by chance? And I have to say, when I look at it, it doesn't look to me at all like chance.
And these are, look at these pictures. I mean, look at this. This one right here really gets me. I just saw this too the other day. Today, actually. I was looking at Venus. I mean, that, I don't know. I couldn't paint a girl in agony any better than that. That's art. And if you look at all the things that surround her, now my oldest son says that he sees her as like an angel of death with wings. I don't see that. I see a guy's face here with a big body and his arm coming around her, and she's like, ah, and there's her hand. It's like she's being dragged into a hole. You see that? I just recently noticed this face right here, too. I didn't see that before. I'm just now noticing that for the first time. That's even more prominent. I mean, gosh, and this looks like some kind of hideous creature. There's something coming out of a hole right there. There's two front legs. This is like, it's like this all over the planet. And then you got this one here. What is this? It looks like, I don't know, some creature towards something. And then there's something right here. And there's that guy right there. I wish the planet wouldn't have got, because every picture of it shows a different kind of, it's almost like ever-changing murals. And you can just go all over the whole planet and see this stuff. But anyways, I just wanted to bring that to your attention. You may have already, there's something there. You may have already noticed this, and I'm just, reaffirming it to you that there's something crazy going on over there. I mean, that I just have a hard time believing that that is all pareidolia. And if it is, then, wow. There's one. There's a creature kind of bending down, or a lady or something. What if Venus was hell, and we're looking at what's going on in hell? Look at that creature there, some guy. I remember one time my oldest brother told me, he said, you ever wonder what hell sounds like? And I said, no, I try not to think of that. And he said that the Bible says it's a wailing and gnashing of teeth. That always bothered me. I wish he wouldn't have never said that. And look at here, look at this scene. Now there's a scene. Now there's somebody walking towards him. See, there's a plank there. There's the areas walking. There's something in the background. I know I have an active imagination, but it really doesn't take much of one to see these pictures. Just go to any picture of it with its, pretty gas haze taken away, and man, this planet has been tortured. There's something about it. There is the creature, the black-faced creature. It's just another angle of it. But that whole thing has got to be monstrous. You know, it's probably some kind of a place that got severely burned. Maybe from its time by Saturn or Jupiter. This planet is just, I mean, like I said, the murals on it are just amazingly crazy. For lack of a better description, they're hell-like. This is a crazy looking picture right there. I don't know, that could be a lot of things. There's another one that almost became a face. Not quite, but almost. It's a pretty distorted looking dude. Let's see, what else can I find? Well, here's one right here. And it's not until you really look at these pictures for a while before they start to show how amazing they are. I mean, art, it's nobody could, well, I'm sure there could be people that could draw it better, but it seems so fused into the landscape so perfectly almost. Of course, this area right here that is circling the planet several times is absolutely has to be where Saturn was sculpting it with all those beautiful designs that we were seeing on Earth, the four rivers and the cross, all of the symbols. It was, as that was going on, it was causing all kinds of stress on Venus's shape, body, you know, just scalding it. It's a pretty crazy planet when you really look at it. There's no way that this planet has a 4 billion year history. This is a baby planet. There's not even any dirt on this planet. That's how young it is. That's how new it is. I see a face there. I mean, there's all kind. There's a couple, I don't know, something kind of creatures. There's a guy. Look at that. He's got a nice beard. Man, I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Look at this right here. There's a guy. He's looking up. Like I said, maybe Venus is hell. I don't know. I have this feeling that the universe is our playground when we're in spirit form. And you know, that would make sense, because I don't think such a beautiful universe could be made for no one to enjoy. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't compute. Look at that. That's pretty crazy there too. To go with that wild harebrained hypothesis, perhaps there's golf on Saturn. It's just endless golf courses and parks. You think it would be possible that fudging the colors of Saturn, it's known as the god of seeds, and in this picture just happened to catch a green look? Just wondered if they replaced that with that sandy, bland color. Isn't beige about the most boring color there is? Saturn is considered the jewel of the solar system. It's not because of its color. That's the only boring thing about the planet, or star, I should say. Now this picture right here, there's two of them. There's one with Quetzalcoatl, I think, or of Aztec. And then we got this one from the Greeks, of the man. Is the snake, or the whatever that is, eating the man, or is he spitting him out? I've often wondered that. Carl Sagan estimates that super technological starmen with interstellar spaceships may have visited Earth some 5,000 times since life first proliferated on Earth some 500 million years ago. Can you imagine what would have happened to Velikovsky if he would have said that? Here's a very interesting situation from Lloyd Pye. I don't know what to think about the Anannaki part, but he makes sense. Check this out and let me know what you think in the comments.
Mitochondrial DNA. We found out in the in the 70s that if we checked the mitochondrial DNA of our females, we could find out how far the line went back. So they said, okay, great. Let's find out if we broke from the common ancestor at 8 million years ago or 5 million years ago. So they took samples of DNA, mitochondrial DNA, which only passes down from females, from women all over the world, and what they found out was, lo and behold, it's not 8, it's not 5 million years ago, it's all the way down to 200,000 years ago. To everyone's great surprise, we don't exist as a species according to our mitochondrial DNA prior to approximately 200,000 years ago. What a surprise. So what the anthropologists have to say is, well, there was some little group somewhere, some little cluster somewhere, and all the others like us died out, and that little cluster somehow around 200,000 years ago, that little bottleneck somehow created the whole species. Garbage. Garbage. More garbage. Next slide. What they found is not that we existed, not only existed 200,000 years ago, that where we came from was South Africa. Not only when we came, but where we came. The oldest of us, the oldest of our females, come from southern Africa. Guess what the Sumerians said? We were created in southern Africa. So they're writing this 4,000 years ago. They're calling it on the nose. They're saying it around 200,000 years ago in southern Africa, and that's what our geneticists are turning up. Now, just for laughs, you can imagine how this Newsweek cover went over in the Deep South, in Louisiana and places like that where I come from. They tried to make these blacks look as white as they could, hoping they could skate down in the South, but of course it ticked off blacks everywhere, and they caught it coming and going. But they did tell the truth. Okay, next slide. This is another indication of some tampering with the cerebral cortex. Is the deeply convoluted surface region of the brain that is most strongly linked to intelligence. That's this stained part on the outside. Strip it off a rat, postage stamp. Monkey, postcard. Chimpanzee, typing, 1 sheet of typing paper. Human, 4 sheets of typing paper. What the heck happened there? Our closest kin, supposedly. And not only that, we only use maybe half a sheet, maybe 1 sheet. We don't know, but we know we use a very small portion of the brain we've been given. How do we know that? Because of the work with savants. It used to be called idiot savants. And in the damage to their good sheet, they get a little like a spot of light here, spot of light here, spot of light here, somewhere in the remainder, and that'll be art, math, painting, music. You've all seen them. You've all seen their genius so far surpasses our regular geniuses, it's absurd. So we know that since there's over 100 of them, all of our brains have this full capacity, but we, the normal ones, are only using a small part for some reason. Why? The Anannaki. What do you want your slave to be? Smart as you? No. Smart, but not too smart. Able to take instructions. Here, go here, do this, and come back and tell me when you're done. You give them just enough. But they had to give us their bodies and their brains. Why? Because they didn't want their slaves looking like this guy or the hominoids. They wanted it to look like themselves. Why? So they could have some women. There weren't enough women. There were mostly men. So they had a deadline, and they went to work to create that slave and servant. Next slide. And they did it how? Genetic manipulation. Genes just the way we do it. You can cut, you can take something out, you can put anything in, and at this level you can put fish into fowl, plant into animal, anything. It all is the same at that level. Why? Because it's all made out of the same 4 base pairs and the same 20 amino acids. It's interchangeable. It's almost as if it's planned. It's almost as if somebody wants the ability to just mix and match and make things to suit the environment when the environment calls for it. Time to do it right. They had a deadline. They were dealing with an insurrection. They had a deadline. So they had to crank them out as fast as they could. They're making a slave. Do they care if they're making mistakes? No. Do they care if it affects 1 in 100? No. Do they care if it affects 1 in 10? No. It's a slave. They do not care. So they left a lot of mistakes in us, a lot of genetic defects. And here you've got our full complement of 46 chromosomes, 23 pairs, and you have 28 of our major genetic defects, but we have over 4,000. How does a species collect over 4,000 genetic defects in only 200,000 years when creatures that have been on the earth for sure for millions of years don't have even a couple of handfuls, if that many? And furthermore, how do we as a species get genetic defects that will kill you before you can reach the age of maturity and pass it on into the gene pool? How'd that get into the gene pool? We got a couple of dozen of those. The only way is if it was done with poor genetic cutting and splicing and the mistakes were just left there. It's the only way. This is something that, of course, is never talked about, but which every geneticist in the world is fully aware. Okay? Next slide. Now, this is a comparison of orangutan, gorilla, chimpanzee, human, and as you see, as we're always told, gee, our DNA is an awful lot like them. Well, of course, it's going to be like primate. If we had a hominoid up here, it would probably be even closer. But the key to this slide is not that, not the closeness, because if you know what you're doing, you can take just a few genes and make some really amazing changes. The problem is what the Anannaki faced when they wanted to make that slave and the servant. You have to assume they have 46 chromosomes, because we have 46 chromosomes, the only primate with 46 chromosomes. All of the primates have 48. How did that happen? How could we be so much better and have lost 2 chromosomes? It's an awful lot of DNA. How could that happen? Doesn't make sense, does it? And yet we're told we're primates even though we don't have primate bones, we don't have primate muscles, we don't have primate skin, we don't have primate hair patterns, we're thick on front, light on back. We don't have that. We don't have primate heads, we don't have primate brains, we don't have primate faces, we don't have primate anything. We're not primates. So the Anannaki have to do an important thing. They have to somehow find a way to make a zygote, a living thing, to begin this process. You've got to take a 48 chromosome creature or a 46 chromosome creature, and you've got to make them match up. How do you do that? You're going to have 24 in the sperm, 23 in the egg, 23 in the egg, 24 in the sperm. Can you take away a whole chromosome from the 48? No. Can you take away, can you add a chromosome to yours? Oh, if I didn't say it, they're using the creature of Earth. They say in the tablets, we will use the creature of Earth as a model. They wanted us to be genetically a little bit better adapted to this planet than they were. So they had that 48-46 problem. How could you do it? Sounds impossible, doesn't it? The only way is to take 2 of those chromosomes on the 48 and fuse them together so that all the chromosomal material remains, but it now only takes up 1 space in the connecting process with the 23. You with me on that? Let me see some heads. Okay, next slide. Here we go, the 2nd and 3rd chromosome of the orangutan, gorilla, chimp, but look at ours. Fused. Fused. And scientists say, well, somehow that happened in nature. Nature did that. BS. Nature couldn't do that. That is genetic engineering. Chimp, but look at ours. Fused. Fused. And scientists say, well, somehow that happened in nature. Nature did that. BS. Nature couldn't do that. That is genetic engineering.
Is Britain's largest radio telescope, the Chilbolton Observatory. And here it was that the greatest sensation in the crop circle history was to appear in the fields right in front of the telescope.
On the morning of 14th of August 2001, a formation was discovered which was different from any other previously seen. From the ground, it looked like a tangled mess, wisps of crops spread around in no system. However, in the evening, with growing shadows, a picture appeared, unmistakably that of a face. That picture represented a whole new technique, a screen technique, the same that's used for printing a picture on paper. 3 days later, the face was joined by something that looked like a data strip. Rows of counters made out of standing and flattened crop. But soon an astonishing similarity is discovered. In 1974, the astronomer Carl Sagan composed a message that NASA sent into space from the Arecibo telescope in Puerto Rico. Binary figures which constituted a graphic code presenting key factors about humans and the planet we live on. 27 years later, an identical pattern appears in a crop field right in front of a similar radio telescope. However, on closer inspection, it seemed to show that the code contained some fundamental differences. Sagan's message explained our calculation system, the dominant chemical substances within the elements that create life on Earth, about our DNA code, humans' height and quantity, and that we live on the third planet in our solar system, and lastly, a sketch of our radio telescope. The message received described the same calculation system, but that silicon is most dominant in life forms in contrast to carbon. The drawing also clearly shows a humanoid figure with large head in relation to its body. It's also explained that they have an extra string in their DNA, are approximately 4 feet tall, inhabit the third, fourth and fifth planets in their solar system, and have a population of around 21.3 billion. Underneath, the telescope has been replaced by something more complex. 1 year earlier, a strange crop circle had appeared in the same place. Is this the same illustration as in the sender's code? Is this the correspondence radio telescope? If this is not an extremely clever and well-calculated joke conducted by humans, is it a serious response from an alien civilization?
The Chilbolton crop formations really gave new life to the speculations of who is behind this. Is it aliens? Where do they come from? And what is their purpose of this type of communication?
The following year, very nearly on the same day, a new picture appears that gives new force to the alien theory, this time in Crabwood, near the town of Winchester in Hampshire. Once again we see a face, but this time there is an unmistakable resemblance to something extraterrestrial. The picture also contains a print, somewhat similar to that of a CD, with something that appears to be a coded message. This formation also has a new type of design, this time with horizontal line patterns of variable thickness, similar to that of a TV picture. The message on the disc is similar to a spiral band built up of many boxes. But data expert Paul Weige manages to decipher the message.
And I had to enlarge the disc quite substantially on the computer and run some image analysis over it to make it clear so that I could see what was a standing tuft and what was flattened. And while I was doing this, I noticed that every so often there was almost a mistake in the diagram. It was like there was a tuft, where the little square tuft, it had done sort of half size. I thought that's a bit odd, and it seemed fairly regular. I was going round, and I sort of counted up, and it was sort of literally every sort of 8 bytes or whatever. And I thought, oh, 8 bytes, and you know, from the computer side, is obviously some sort of binary code. So then I, did the straightforward thing. I just converted it into ASCII, which is the standard sort of computer language that you encode the alphabet in. And of course I then started to get words forming out, and I thought, I'm getting somewhere here. So I then did the whole thing for the whole lot, and got this message.
The message is in English and reads as follows: Beware the bearers of false gifts and their broken promises. Much pain, but still time. There is good out there. We oppose deception. Conduit closing. Many have been surprised by this message. Are there aliens with such faces that we should be aware of? Or is this a picture of the sender? Does this indicate the start of actual close contact with neighbors in the universe?
Gigantic men, the Adites, are remembered by the Arabians as a great civilized race. They are depicted as men of gigantic stature. Their strength was equal to their size, and they easily moved great blocks of stone.